Welcome back to the Foundry. So on the heels of the last few videos where I fixed up my old Honda Foreman, which led to the restoration of my vintage motorcycle and ATV trailer, it kind of put me in the mood to do some recreational riding. And what better to do that with than a dirt bike? So I thought we'd go dig through the warehouse and try to find the perfect candidate for our little project. Now bear with me, the lighting out here is a little bit subpar, but I was just looking through my old inventory of projects and collections, and it looks like we got about 3 candidates. They all happen to be Kawasaki, which is fine. I like Kawasaki. So back there against the wall, I've got a KDX, I believe it's a 200. The seat for it is over there, but it looks like it's missing the tank. That might be kind of hard to find. Right here, I've got a KX125. Fun little bike. It's got a full FMF exhaust. Looks like some aftermarket bars on it. I don't really remember the status of that one. Right here, I've got a, this is my 93 KLX650R. And honestly, I think this may be the ticket right here. Man, I haven't so much as started this bike and much less rode it in probably over a decade. I would say, man, maybe 2012, 2013 maybe. But it was a really clean bike. Let's take a look here. Still is pretty darn clean. Tires are flat, dry rotted. The grips are just completely rotted off of it. They're all sticky and nasty. I think this might be the one. So let me dig it out of here. Looks like it's got a pretty good oil leak. There's bird poop all over the seat. The tires, see that big crack there? The tires are just trashed. And it's covered in dust, and there's insulation all over it for some reason, fiberglass insulation. So I think the goal of this video, what I'm going to try to do, give it a once over, make a list of everything that it needs, and I'm also going to try to see if I can start it and get it running. And that might be a tall order because odds are there's probably ethanol fuel in that carburetor, and it's not looking too good. So might be a little bit of a project just to get that far. All right, for this project, I've decided to bring it into the automation room, also known as the clean room. We still got a couple months of winter left, and you know, I got that Dearborn heater right there, so I figured this might be a good place to do it. Plus, I hope I've got better lighting in here than I do in the shop. I'm using a new camera, have been using it for the last video or so, and it does not like my lighting nearly as well as my old camera did. So still trying to work with that. So first thing I'm gonna do is get rid of these nasty grips. Yeah, I can't even walk by this thing without getting that mess on my hands, and it's sticky and it doesn't come off. So these are gone. This is awful. Oh. Sometimes you need to put super glue on the grips to keep them from moving once you get them installed. On the throttle side here, I have found that it's usually pretty tight enough to where that's not necessary. My throttle side grips hardly ever move. Much better, much better. If I don't do nothing else and abandon the project right here, I'm happy just to have gotten rid of those nasty grips. But alas, we're not gonna abandon this project. I'm too emotionally invested in it now. You see, memories are coming back. You know, I haven't ridden this thing in years and years, but pretty interesting history behind this bike, how I ended up owning it and how it got here. I bought this thing in, I wanna say like 2002. from a dealer. It had virtually no hours on it. Somebody bought this thing and right out of the gate, they crashed it. I believe they laid it over on asphalt or concrete or something. So what happened was the foot peg mashed up into the Kickstarter shaft, which in turn broke the crankcase behind this clutch cover, broke the crankcase out of it. And it also severely bent the handlebars. You can see how this grip's a little bit deformed right here. That's because the throttle tube, twist throttle tube, has so much road rash on it that it's kind of formed a sharp point right here. And of course it broke the brake lever handle, but I just used the old 2-finger method on my brakes anyway, so I never replaced that. I did replace the hand guards as well as the handlebars. I went back with genuine Kawasaki original handlebars, just like what come on it. And so anyway, I didn't get this thing actually going until probably about 2007. It just stayed in my shed. And during the course of that time, you see this big exhaust pipe here. So moisture can get in there, and it did. Traveled up to the engine, and it rusted the piston rings to the nickel-plated cylinder bore. So in 2007, when I dug it out and I said, hey, I'm gonna get this thing going, the engine was locked up. Well, I already knew it needed crankcases, so you know, it wasn't a huge deal. Tore it down, sent the cylinder off to get replated. Could not find replacement crankcases, but I did find a total bottom end from a KLX650C model. That's the dual sport model. The gear ratios, to my knowledge, are the same. The crankcases themselves are the same. There are some differences, such as the C model's electric start. So I believe I had to use the R model crank clutch cover. And I think I had to use the R model stator and flywheel, because the C model has the electric start, which I didn't have a starter. I didn't have the wiring or anything. All I had was a bare bottom end. So anyway, I was able to use that. And while I was at it, I went ahead and did the cam chain adjustment upgrade. They come factory with an automatic chain tensioner, which is notorious about failing and ruining the valve train. So I converted it into a manual adjustment. Pretty common on these back in the day was to do that little upgrade. And from 2007 to 2012, 2013, I enjoyed driving it periodically. And then my rear brake master cylinder went out, fork seals began leaking, it needs tires, and there is a small oil leak which has gotten larger and is apparently coming from the output shaft or counter shaft that the sprocket is on. I initially turned a blind eye to it and allowed it to persist because it acted as an automatic chain oiler, and it was very convenient, and it only left like a dime-sized puddle on the floor. Well, now it's leaving a huge puddle, so I'm gonna have to address that. But before we get into all that, I think the play here is just to see if it will run, because I don't want to throw a bunch of time and money at this thing only to learn that it doesn't run. There's something wrong with it. So let's get into it. Time hasn't been too kind to my air filter. It is totally trashed. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the carburetor out and go through it. I'm gonna unhook the choke, remove some of these hoses, unhook the throttle cables, and try to wrestle it out. These hoses are so hard. Just time has not been good to it. All right, I can already tell there's varnish on the outside. It's really going to need to be cleaned. I think the diaphragm is still in good shape. We're going to open it up and see what we're going to be dealing with here. So it's not quite as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I do see that the needle valve is stuck in the seat. There it goes. Make sure the floats aren't full of gas. Look okay. Tip is still pretty soft. There's not a heavy wear ring around it, so that's good. The seat, looks like I may be able to get that out of there with, actually I think that's pressed in. I'm not sure, but I've got a way to polish that seat. I'll pull the jets and clean those. Let's check the diaphragm just to be sure. These diaphragms can be very fragile, very thin rubber, so I'm going to be careful with it. There's the needle. I think it'll live. Now my carburetor's cleaning up pretty good. I haven't seen any damaged components that I need to replace or anything to justify buying like an overhaul kit for it or anything like that. One thing I like to do when I clean an old carburetor is to avoid, a lot of times you'll put these things back together and turn on your gas valve and you'll see fuel coming out of the overflow tube, which is this tube right here when it's on the bike. So to avoid that, in addition to inspecting the needle itself, I like to polish the seat. What I do is I take a cotton swab, chuck it in my drill, and I'll dip the end of it in a little bit of lapping compound. Now, you want to use the fine compound as opposed to the coarse, unless your seat is just really crusty. But you could also use like, polishing compound, rubbing compound, anything like that. And just put it down in there and let that thing polish the seat. Doesn't take much at all. And if you don't have any compound, you can take a piece of wood. I like to, kitchen match, a wooden dowel. For years, I had a little twig in the top of my toolbox, come off an oak tree out in the yard. You just take your pocket knife and whittle it down to a tip and put it down in there like that. Careful not to snap it off. And you just work it back and forth, and a lot of times it will actually start making a squeaking sound. It's so clean. I've done this for years and I've never had one leak after I put it back together. The carburetor went together pretty well and wasn't too terrible to get it back in here. I got it all hooked up, and while I'm here, it's a really good time to change the spark plug. And if there's one little gripe I have about this bike in terms of maintenance, that spark plug is really a pain in the neck. And this is why it's important to keep that spark plug port as clean as possible. And I can see that the previous owner had wrapped this whole boot in tape to make it more expansive to where it seals better in that head cover, because when water gets in there, it's a big problem. There's nowhere for it to go. There's a port on the side of the head that gets stopped. That's to drain any water that might get in here, and it often gets stopped up, and then you end up with this crusty rust around your spark plug, and then when you go to take it out, this rust falls into the cylinder. So I'm going to blow it out again, and in hopes of anything that fell in the cylinder will blow itself out there. So my drain port here on the side of the cylinder head was stopped up with aluminum oxidation. I was able to get it free with some, I ran a wire up in there and then some compressed air. Got the new spark plug in. Now my tank is it's not real great on the inside. There's some varnish. There was actually no liquid fuel left in it from having set up for 12 years. And I sloshed around some fresh gas and tried to drain it out as best I could, but it didn't take care of that varnish. So what I'd like to do is install a fuel filter, but the way this special shaped fuel line is, and you probably can't even see up in there, but it's very difficult to have enough space. So it may require me to use my own fuel line. That way I can put the filter down here where there's a little bit of room. So I found a filter and some gas line in my stock. Purposefully went with a clear filter because I want to be able to see what's going on and know when I need to change it. So now I think we're about ready to put some fuel in this thing and see if it'll pop off. Now it's not going to run right without an air filter, but I believe it will run good enough, to see if this is going to justify spending all the money for all the parts that I'm going to need to complete this. So now I'm going to take and just kind of vacuum out this air box so I'm not sucking junk up into the engine in the event that it does start. I always like to pick up vintage gas cans when I run across them in good shape, given the state of modern gas cans. But let not the exterior of this one fool you. The inside, I assure you, is clean as a whistle. It may take a minute to get that carburetor full. That's a sound I have not heard in over a decade. It's really loud without this airbox lid on there and without a filter, but yeah, it ran pretty good. Engine's quiet. Wouldn't idle off a choke very well. That's because it's a little bit leaned out, not having that filter on there. So the good news is, yes, it runs, and I think we can justify the rest of this endeavor. So I'm going to go round up an air filter and a few other things, and I don't know, we might actually try to drive it just to kind of wrap this video up. I might see if I can get some air in those hard, cracked old tires. Now, we don't have a rear brake, but maybe if I'm careful, I can take it for a little scoot. Wow. I forgot how fast this thing was, and it's really snappy, and it pulls like a freight train. So I didn't put it all back together because I got a lot more to do to it. We're going to do new set of tires, get rid of these old cracked Dunlops. We're going to replace the oil seal on the counter shaft, and we're going to reseal the forks. It was backfiring a little bit on deceleration. I've got the spark arrestor removed from the pipe. I don't really remember it doing that all that much. Maybe it did. It's been a long time. I don't know. But we'll get back on this thing when we reconvene. Until then, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.